Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. Guys, I'm really excited about tonight's podcast. I've got Wyatt with me, and Wyatt's from my home state of Arkansas, and he's had a lot of different strange things happen to him while he was out hunting in the woods, in different places around the state. One night he was out hunting and had this creature growl at him and pace him out of the woods. He's had that happen. Also, in another encounter, he was out mushroom hunting with his family and heard a baby cry way out in the middle of the woods, and he believes this creature was trying to call him out. A lot of different strange stuff has happened, and towards the end of the episode, he's going to talk about a dogman encounter he had in my home state. So a lot of good stuff to go over tonight, some photo evidence, you name it, this episode has it. But before we jump into any of that, I just want to say thank you for being here, supporting this podcast, and just being part of this. I couldn't do it without you. If you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. Well, let's jump right in the story. Wyatt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, man, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Well, man, it's my honor to have you here. When you sent me that email and told me you were from my home state of Arkansas, I knew I had to have you on, so I'm really excited to go into all these encounters. So why don't you kind of start at the beginning and just kind of walk us through these?
The first thing I'm going to tell you about is, how I kind of got into my traipse down the Bigfoot pathway. And it actually involved an encounter. It just wasn't mine. My grandpa, probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old, he showed up at my house one evening after school, and he told me that, well, I seen a Bigfoot walk across the road. And he's like, if the school bus would have been just a little bit closer, it would have seen it too. And so I guess that was probably how I got started in it. My first encounter happened in the Ozarks National Forest. I don't know if you've heard of Boxley, but it occurred about 12 miles from there on Cave Mountain. What happened was I was deer hunting in November of 2021, and there's this fire tower that I always hunt below. I've killed a lot of deer down there, and the weird thing about this one was my first encounter was these guys showed up. I guess they were hunters, and they were asking if I had seen their buddy. I guess he'd left camp that morning and they hadn't seen him. I told them no, I hadn't seen him. They didn't ask me to help him look for him or anything like that. So anyway, so I'm walking down, and I don't think anything ever came of that because I never heard of any missing persons around there. And I was there the next day, and the game wardens would have been there if something would have actually happened. But anyway, I was walking down to my spot where I hunt, and I got almost down there, and I start hearing what sounded like, well, I guess what everybody would describe as a wood knock. And this kept going, and it probably went on for, I'd say, close to 10 to 15 minutes. It was just steady. And I actually, when I first heard it, I believed in Bigfoot for a long time, but when I first heard this, I'm not going to use the words I used, but because it's not very appropriate, but I'm like, no way. Because, it was shocking to me because I've always thought about Bigfoot, but I never expected to have an encounter at all. So anyway, I yell out, and I'm asking, is anybody out there? Because those guys just asked me about their buddy, and if it's their buddy, maybe he's knocking to let people know where he's at. I never got a response, and it kept on for a little while. And so I don't know if it's pure stupidity or I wouldn't call it bravery, but when nothing answered me, I just went and sat down by the tree I always sit by, and I sat there and deer hunted. My next experience occurred over at our property near Vendor, Arkansas. I don't know if you've heard of Mount Judy, Arkansas, but it's real close to there. This was in March or April of 2022. We were morel mushroom hunting. My wife, my little girl, and her parents were there. And we were, just hunting for mushrooms. Everybody does it during the springtime. Anyway, I heard what I could only describe as a baby crying in the woods. I know from, watching YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff that apparently that can be associated with Bigfoot encounters. And that's what I was telling my wife. I asked her if she heard it, and she heard it too. And I'm not saying that it was a Bigfoot, because there are other properties that surround our property there. It could have been somebody outside with a child. But I just found it odd that time because my wife and little girl were with me. That kind of made me feel like something might have been trying to get their attention. But it got my attention because I pay close attention when I'm in the woods anymore. I don't go into the woods without a firearm at all. And I had one that day. Fast forward to November of that year. I'm hunting at the same property. I'm sitting down in this little valley, and I'm just sitting there waiting for a deer to walk by. All of a sudden, I hear something growl. It was like, it wasn't real loud, but it sounded like it meant business. So I'm like, well, I'm moving. I'm going somewhere else. So I walk back around the property, and I walk to the completely opposite side of the property. And I start walking down in the woods there. And I hear the same thing. Something growls at me again. So I'm thinking, there's either two of something or something following me. So a little bit after I heard the second growl, something dropped out of a tree. It was probably a squirrel, but I can't confirm that. I've heard of them, spider crawling, but that kind of hit my nerves a little bit hearing the two growls. So I backed out of the woods with my 7 mag facing into the woods, and I decided I was going to leave then. I think I may have stayed there a little while longer and hunting, but I wasn't down in the woods as far as I was. I don't know if it was more than one or if it was just the same thing, but either way, getting followed or having two of them. After that, me and my buddy, we worked together. We worked on the same shift, and we started talking. And he got to saying what I needed to come out with him on Table Rock Lake because he'd had a few things happen. His name's Richard. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. So the first time we went out there, this is near the border of Arkansas, Missouri. And we were just trolling along, just half fishing. And I'm looking for Bigfoot, but I'm halfway fishing. I'm not a very good fisherman. He could tell you that. I'm no good at using the bait casters. I've got to use the one with the flippy thing. But anyway, we're just trolling along, and we ended up seeing some eye shine. And then a little while later, I see this thing behind a log, and it's just like a white circle. And me and him are both looking at it, and it just vanishes. I don't know what happened to it. It just wasn't there anymore. About 5 minutes or less later after that, we hear a wood knock. And this is the crispest wood knock I've ever heard. It sounded like a Louisville slugger, hitting another Louisville slugger, basically. You get that real crisp. I've heard people say it could be them clicking their tongues, but this sounded like wood on wood to me. And just a little bit after that, my buddy could hear but Richard could hear something walking along the bank of the lake. We couldn't see it, but there was something there. We went back out in October, and we were trolling along back in this one cove, and he has running lights along the side of the boat, and I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, man, I think there's something over here. We shined the spotlight on it, and it was like this structure. And it looked like the typical what you hear people describe, like a little teepee without the covering on it. It wasn't huge. It was just a bunch of little sticks, but it looked like a teepee without the covering. So there was like some rope intertwined in it, and there was some like bigger blocks beside it, like bricks or something. I don't know why they were there. I talked to my buddy about that. He said we discussed it could be man-made, but the funny thing is Richard, he'd noticed in the back of this structure there was a stick perfectly balanced on another stick, and it was just sitting there. And there was also like an impression on the ground. I wouldn't say, and it almost looked like the shape of a foot, but it didn't really have the perfect definition. It just looked like something had stepped down and left an impression on the ground. We got off the boat there and looked around. Couldn't see anything right around there, but there was a bunch of little clams there, like something had been eating clams and stuff, or whatever the little things in the shells are. at the lakes. Something had been eaten there, quite a bit of it. So anyway, we're leaving that spot, leaving the structure area, and when I was shining the light over there, the spotlight just went dead out of the blue. So I thought that was weird. But as we were leaving, when we got to a different part of the lake, the spotlight started working again. So I've heard several stories of people having their electronics fail. If they're near a Bigfoot or something like that. Like I said, I don't claim any of it's Bigfoot, but kind of I feel like it may be. Now, March of 2024, we went back to Table Rock Lake. We could hear something walking on the bank, sounded like it was on 2 feet. And we caught quite a bit of eye shine as well that time. We caught some of it on IR. When we were leaving, we could hear some. They were on both sides of us. Richard, he made like a little whoop, and all of a sudden, off to the left of us, which was on the opposite side of where we were hearing most of the stuff, something bust the brush, and just you could hear it go up the hill. As close as we were to it, I should have been able to look over to my left, and I should have been able to see it go up the hill. I didn't see a thing. So anyway, we felt like they were kind of escorting us out of there at that time. In May of 2024, we went back there. We had trolled up next to a highline right away, and I was shining my spotlight up. Well, it's actually Richard's spotlight, but I was shining it up the right away, and it just died. About 5 minutes later, and this is what really sent the chills down my spine. We hear this whistle, and I don't even know how to describe it to you, Josh. It was so loud that no human being could have made this whistle. And it lasted for a few seconds, and as it went on, it changed octaves as it went up. So that sent chills down my spine. About 5 minutes later, after that, a pack of coyotes fired up right behind us, and they were loud. You couldn't see them though. I don't know where they were. You could turn around back where you were hearing it, and there was nothing there. I know people are going to call me crazy, but I honestly think whatever it was, when it whistled, it called the pack of coyotes close to us. I don't know if they were using it to hunt us or get closer to us or what. So we're trolling out. And the bad part about where we go back in these coves is there's a bunch of stumps and stuff. So if we want to get out of there in a hurry, there is no getting out of there in a hurry because we have to troll out. So if there is anything, if it wanted to jump in the water and to get the boat, well, it's going to get in the water and get the boat. So as we're trolling out, we start hearing stuff on the right side of us. It sounded like it broke a tree over. You hear how you hear wood breaking. And just a little bit after that, we hear something really, really loud hit the water. And that's when I drew my pistol because it just scared me. I didn't have my hand on the trigger or anything when I drew it. I just drew it out of instinct. And he said that wasn't no fish that hit the water. He's fished for years, and that didn't sound like a fish. So we're assuming that was a rock that hit the water. It also crossed my mind that a Bigfoot could have jumped in the lake right behind us, and that made me even more scared. But come to June of 2024, we're back out there. The lake was really up, and there was a bunch of debris in the water, and we were trying to decide where we wanted to go, and so we decided to go to a cove that was closer than the one we normally go to. And as we're trolling back into this cove, my hands, it was like 60 something degrees that night, but my hands started getting really, really cold, and I can't explain that. It could have just been my hands getting cold, but they shouldn't have been getting cold. Anyway, we get back into this cove, and we hear something start busting the brush. I mean, like loud. And I'm trying to get my light on, or Richard's light, trying to get that light on. He's like, "You need to get that dang light on." I'm like, "I'm trying, I'm trying." When I finally get the light on, it's still making the noise, and I'm shining it where it should. We're hearing all this stuff come from, and still can't see nothing. As close as we were, I should have been able to look right out there and see something just sitting there shaking the trees and stuff. But there ain't nothing. There wasn't anything there. And so after that, I think I had to sit down. I don't know if it was an adrenaline dump or what, but as soon as I sat down, just maybe a minute or two later, I hear something walking up on the other side of the boat. Now Richard, he don't scare very easily, and but this night he decided we needed to get out of there. So we troll back. Uh, we start trolling out of there, and we can hear something walking in the woods, following us out. But yeah, I don't understand why something's making so much noise and you can't see it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people speculate that maybe they have hair shafts that are clear and they absorb the light around them or absorb the area around them. So maybe that's what it was. But as many times as I've heard stuff, I should be able to see at least one thing. I mentioned D.A. Roberts earlier. Uh, he has a podcast called DAX Machina. He's an author, real good dude. Uh, well, we all decided that we wanted to go into this abandoned campground on Table Rock. Uh, so several of us went. His co-host, some of his friends. I I didn't get all their permissions to mention them by name, so I'm not going to do that. But we had to go in by boat. Technically, we weren't supposed to be in this area that we went into, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, we had to go in by boat. Da, his son, and his co-host, they were the first boots on the ground, and they said no sooner had they got there, they started having activity. I came in a couple of boatloads behind them. Richard, it's his boat that we normally use. He was ferrying everybody from the boat ramp over to where we went. So we're walking along and we find this area. We call it a track trap, basically just a dried up area of mud. We found what kind of looked like a Bigfoot track in that area. Now this campground, it's been closed down for like 40 years, and it looks like basically like a bomb went off. It's post-apocalyptic. Uh, there's like all sorts of all the campgrounds are grown over. Uh, they were the concrete picnic tables were busted into pieces, and these weren't just no little concrete tables. They were about 8 inches thick. So DA's co-host and I, we're walking in the back of the pack. We don't have our headlamps on or headlamps on. Uh, we're talking, and he's looking over to. I'm here, and he's over to this side, so he's looking this direction, and he catches something as we're walking. He was like, "Hold on, just a minute, Wyatt." And so we shine our lights on it, and this is going to sound crazy when I tell you, but there was part of a deer carcass, the front leg and part of the skin, sitting in this cedar tree, and it was just hanging there. It was fresh enough that part of the meat on the skin was still red, but underneath it you could see where the blood had dripped, and there was deer hair and stuff all over the ground. That's probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen in the woods. Not gonna lie. Besides the next thing, it's pretty weird too. I'm getting a little nervous, so when we see this, I text Richard. He's on the boat still. He's just fishing along the bank of this peninsula. It's called Combs Ferry. I text him. I'm like, don't go very far in that boat because there's something out here. So we walk a little further, and I can't remember which one of us found it, but we found this fish head. It's stuck in the crook of a little tree, It had been torn off and placed in this little tree. The only thing we could figure out was it was territorial markers, and something didn't want us in there. And that tree that the deer was found in, a lot of people, I'm sure, would speculate that it's a big cat that put it in there. But this tree wasn't very big. It really wasn't big enough for a big cat to get up there and do what had been done. Plus, it was like intricately draped over these two limbs in that tree. And then, of course, we found the fish head. So we felt like something was sending us a message that it didn't want us there. Anyway, DA, his son, and his co-host, they were the last ones to get extracted. They said when Richard finally got back to where they were at, they had backed down into the water, had their pistols drawn, because whatever was there, it had started moving in closer to them. Before we got to the boat ramp, though, Richard had said he was seeing eye shine up in the trees. And I guess when they were extracting, they were seeing eye shine, all sorts of eye shine in the trees. So there was more than one of whatever it was. It's a good thing we didn't leave just one person there because, and I hate to say it, I believe that they can get violent when they want to, and especially with all the stuff that we seen that night. If we'd have left just one person, we'd have probably heard gunfire from the boat ramp, and they wouldn't be there when we got back.
I really think that a lot of people go missing due to these creatures. I don't think everybody that's in missing 411 case, but I think a whole lot. And I want to get into all of that. And I know you got a lot more to talk about, but with all that happening to you and these kind of experiences and a lot of strange stuff, man, how has that impacted you, man? How's that affected your life?
That's a good question, Josh. I wouldn't say I'm like completely scared to go in the woods, but I don't go in the woods without a firearm. And after every one of these encounters that I've had, when I get home, you've probably heard of people saying that they've got home and something followed them home. Well, even when I'm out there, I'm praying, don't let anything follow us home. Keep all of our families safe and all this kind of stuff. But when I get home, I don't go to bed. I won't go to bed before the sun comes up or is starting to come up because that's how scared I get.
Well, listen, I think there's something wrong with you if you don't get scared, knowing that these creatures are there and what they can do. And you're smart by doing that, man. Cause I personally know several people that, have went out, had these encounters and then gone home and these things followed them home. Like I know somebody, I talk to them all the time. I'm not going to say their name. They probably wouldn't care, but he's had these things show up where he lives and follow him home. And it is scary and you need to really keep your head on the swivel. And, so I always say stay prayed up because it's so very important, to do that. And, talking about that kind of stuff, man, going back to the encounter when you basically, I guess I would call it, got paced out of there. When you heard that growl sound, you heard it, maybe there's two of them, but what did that sound like? Was it just like a deep guttural growl or was it, could you kind of explain a little bit what that sounded like?
I'll do my best. It wasn't real loud, but whatever did it meant business. And I went back and I listened through some like cougar sounds and stuff, and I guess it could have been a cougar. I had heard stories after that had happened that there were people have seen big cats out there, but that's not their MO most of the time. They don't. That's not their prerogative is to follow humans all the time. So I don't think it was a big cat. It sounded like it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't real loud, but it didn't want me there. Apparently. So.
Well, I personally think you're really fortunate to be here to share those kind of encounters because these things are very territorial in my opinion. And I think that you're right. There's probably two of them there. And yeah, it could have been a squirrel that jumped out of the tree or whatever. But I think that these things have a tendency to pace people out. And if you see one or hear one, there's another one really close by. I think they kind of run in packs. And, for the audience watching tonight that don't know about Arkansas, it gets really thick. The brush gets thick and sometimes it's hard to see. And, I think you're probably very fortunate to be here to share that. But man, did you smell anything during that encounter? Did you feel or sense anything?
I didn't smell anything. No. The only thing I felt was the need to get out of there. I didn't get no mind speak or anything like that. It just felt like something didn't want me there. So I decided after the second one. Like I said, I didn't leave right away, I don't think, but I wasn't sitting down in the woods near as far either.
I think you're spot on, man. Whatever it was, it definitely wanted you out of there, and these things definitely do. That's kind of their MO, man. That's one of the things they do is you hear about them all the time, pacing people out. I've had several guests on the show where these things will, go against the brush line and they'll follow them out, or they'll basically scare you enough to where you leave. And the situation with the deer carcass and hanging in the tree that way, that's really interesting to me. I had a guy come on the show, and he was from Texas and East Texas, I believe, and he had a bunch of property out there, and they've got a problem with wild pigs and boars and stuff. And he said that he found a skeleton hung up in the tree, and it sounds exactly like what you described with the deer, man. What do you think that was all about?
The only thing we can figure out was it was a territorial marker. And not too long after that, there was like I said, the fish head was in the tree too. And for something to leave you something that's dead, kind of sounds like it might be sending a message that you could be next if we wanted you to be. So yeah, that like I said, that's probably the creepiest thing I've ever seen in the woods.
Well, that's creepy enough, man. And it's creepy enough to keep you awake at night, because these things it's such a strange world, man. And I'll always walk away with way more questions than I have answers, when I talk to people that come on the show. And, I kind of have this theory that for whatever reason, when you get down south, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive than other places. And I joke because it's like, because of the humidity, it's so stinking hot, they're gripey. But, what's your opinion with that? Do you think they're more aggressive here than they are in other parts of the country?
I would say you're right. I'd say the heat probably does affect that because, I mean, if I was big and hairy, I'd be pretty mad that I was having to traipse around in all this humidity. They gotta get hot. I mean, unless their hair acts like like a husky's hair, and they have like a double coating or something that keeps them cool underneath there. That's what I would say.
I never thought about that before like that, and I guess that is possible, because it would make a lot of sense that maybe that kept them cool. But who knows with these things, man? It's such a strange world, and I always like to ask people, and it's just because I'm curious and I want to know what everybody thinks. But what do you think these things are, man?
That's a tough question, Josh, because the things I've seen them do. Well, I guess I haven't seen them. I should have seen them. Uh, for to hear that much noise and not see anything, I think they're flesh and blood. But I mean, I also say that there could be something supernatural to them too, and they have. I've heard of them finding hair and then had the clear hair shafts, and that very well could be what it does. They just absorb the light around them, or absorb the area, whatever the color they're in. So if they're in the dark of night and you shine a light on them, maybe they just absorb the light and I'm just not able to see it. I think they're flesh and blood, but maybe with some supernatural aspects to them too.
That's a good answer. I tell you, I look at these things through biblical lens, and I'm always trying to try to understand more and more. And I really do think there's some kind of offspring of the Nephilim or something in that realm. And the true statement I can tell you is when they're flesh and blood, they're flesh and blood, and when they're not, they're not. There's so much that they do, and there's so much in the world with these things that just doesn't make sense. I had a friend of mine that I haven't been able to get him on the show, but he told me some stuff that happened to him when he was a kid. But basically, in Arkansas, I won't tell I won't say where, but he had an encounter that was really strange. He said that he saw this, heard this scream, just this guttural scream. They were out hunting. And he said that the next thing the brush was moving and all the things, and this black figure stepped out like a black Bigfoot. It was a Bigfoot. He said the next thing he said it cloaked like the predator, and it was just gone. He said it literally just cloaked and was gone, and it's things like that just keep me up at night. I'm like, man, what in the world? And it's one of the reasons I don't like to go off into the deep woods anymore, because you just don't know what these things. You don't know what they are or what they could do. But, it's such a strange world. But, if you had the chance to see one up close and personal, man, would you want to?
It depends on if I was within arm's reach. I'd say probably at least 100 yards. That'd be probably good for me. But I have a feeling that I've been closer to them. I've been close enough that they could probably just reach out and grab me before. Uh, I would love to see one. I mean, that's the ultimate goal is to see one if you're researching, right? Uh, but I would kind of like to see it from a distance. Good enough, good enough, good enough where you can see all the details, but far enough away where you could possibly make an escape.
That's probably the best answer you could give, man. I'm telling you, you don't want to be much closer than that. And you're right. You probably have been right up next to these things and you just didn't know it. You know, I think a lot of times people that go off into the woods and go hiking and stuff, they're really close to these creatures and they have no idea. So it kind of makes you think twice about going out there, especially unarmed. And, you know, you're smart by going out there armed and going in groups and with people like that, because you just never know, man. It's so strange. But I know that there's a lot that you've been through and you've talked about, but you mentioned to me off air a Dogman type encounter or something about Dogman. Was that something you're open to talking about?
Oh yeah, that was actually the next one I was going to talk about. It was actually right outside of Branson, is where that happened at. But can I mention one more thing about that, the Combs Ferry thing, real quick?
Absolutely, man.
Well, see, me and Richard, we put the boat in at a different area than what all the other guys showed up at, and we'd all left, and we stayed on the lake for just a little bit. He fished a little bit, but when we got back to the boat ramp, we got off and got to looking around and seen what looked like a footprint. So we go over there. I asked Richard, you know, what he thought. So I took a bunch of pictures and I've sent those to you too. But it did. It looked like one of them looked really good, and there's a bunch of partials there too. But so I sent them to DA, and we've all discussed it, and we felt like that was actually a Bigfoot track. But getting onto the Dogman thing, uh, it was like a month or like the next month, I think, after we went to Combs Ferry, maybe the month after that. But we go back out to our normal. We went back out to our normal spot, and we're trolling around, and we start hearing owl calls. Uh, I didn't think they were actually owl calls. I know you've heard of Tim Coombo Baker, but I heard him mention that if the owl call doesn't have a trill on the end of it, then most likely it's not an owl call. We go back to the cove where we'd actually found the structure the year before, and we're trolling along there, get to shining the lights up in there, and there's like 4 or 5 sets of eye shine right here. And I mentioned Harley, his encounter where he seen the dog man and he turned around and it was laying flat on the ground. I it had bothered me for a while. I was like, why were these eye shines laying on the ground? But when I heard Harley's experience, I'm like, that could be it. They may have been laying flat close to the ground. Anyway, one set of eye shine wasn't laying close to the ground. It was taller and it was up next up next to some trees and stuff. And Richard said it kept peeking back and forth behind this tree. I mean, we were probably at this. We probably had this experience probably for 10 minutes at least, maybe 15, where we kept seeing the eye shine. Uh, anyway, when the light hit this thing the right way, uh, I won't say it's a full on sighting, but the silhouette that I was able, the part of the silhouette that I was able to see, I could tell it had a snout like a dog. And I looked in the eyes of this thing, and probably wasn't a good idea, but when I looked in the eyes of this thing, I told Richard that ain't no Bigfoot. Like I felt evil in those eyes, and I told DA that too. So yeah, I believe it could have been a dog man. I'm not saying 100%, but whatever I looked in the eyes of was evil. I'll stand by that all day long. And it had a snout like a dog.
You know what? That gave me chills, man, because these things to me are a whole league of their own when it comes to to Bigfoot and Dogman. I think that Bigfoot you can question. There's because there's a lot of encounters where people walk away and they don't feel anything evil. They don't, it's just kind of a typical sighting or whatever you want to call it. But with dogmen, it's generally around fear. It seems like that's kind of the thing with them. And I think they're just pure evil, man. I think you're right. And a lot of people, when they look into their eyes and they talk about that, it's different than if you look into the eyes of a Bigfoot. There's something different there. Who knows what these things are, man? But man, that's scary, man, because you just don't know what these things, and they love to strike fear into people for whatever reason. And it's just, I don't know, man. What do you do with something like that? And that does affect you. But man, what do you think there are, man? What do you think dogman is?
I think they're a flesh and blood creature, but they're an evil flesh and blood creature. I mean, just like you can have good and bad people, I just think most of the dogmen probably aren't good. I mean, there could be good ones out there, but this one wasn't good because I don't know. I just got that feeling when I looked into its eyes.
You can definitely tell. You can read a situation. If you spend any time out in the woods, you've been a hunter for any amount of time, you can tell when the woods change, when the atmosphere change. And a lot of people that I talk to that have these encounters, they talk about that stuff. Harley, when he talked about his, he talked about the tangible fear that he felt with that. And then, you talking about something following you home. That's one of the creatures that a lot of people talk about, follow them home. I've had several people on the show that have had these things show up at their house, the next day after the encounter or whatever. But such a strange world, man. And that's, that's why you need to keep your head on the swivel and stay prayed up when you're out there, because you just don't know.
Well, you're exactly right. I'd actually, as we were getting back to the boat ramp, I was texting DA. He's like, be careful. Those things will follow you home. I'm like, will they follow you home 30 miles? He's like, I wouldn't be surprised. He's like, especially if you shoot at them. I'm like, well, I didn't shoot at anything.
No, that's probably good that you didn't, man. That's probably a good move on your part to not shoot at those things, and to just back away slowly and get out of there. But one of the things I like to ask people, but what would you say to somebody listening to the podcast tonight that is on the fence about these things? They're not sure if they believe or not, and they go out into the woods a lot and they're questioning this stuff. What advice would you give them? And, what would you say to them?
I mean, if they're curious, I'd be like, keep an open mind. I mean, there's a lot of things in this world we don't know about just in our everyday lives. There's all sorts of stuff going on behind the scenes that we have no idea about. So why couldn't a creature like this be out there too? I mean, maybe one day they'll reveal it all to us, but I mean, you just got to keep an open mind about it. And then on the other half, if you got, you hear of all the trolls and stuff that want to badmouth and knock around all the people that believe in it, come out with me. Come out with me and see if you believe after that. I mean, I haven't had a full-on sighting, but I had that dogman, and then I think I had a partial sighting of maybe a Bigfoot one time. I can explain that if you want me to.
I'd love to hear about it, man. Yeah, go right into that. And that was going to say, that's a great answer. Guys, if you don't believe, then, hook up with somebody who goes out into the woods that's had these encounters, and you might just have your mind changed for you, because I mean, it's such a strange world. And I can speak firsthand. You once you know these things are there, it changes everything for you. But yeah, man, let's hear about that the partial encounter, man. I'd love to hear about that.
Me, Richard, and his son, we were going out near Flip. This has happened at the Three Fields area I was telling about near Flipping. This is Fort Engineer land. We were going out to put up deer stands. We went to this one spot. We put it up. Of course, I'm always got my head on swivel. I'm listening for stuff, hoping I can hear something or see something. Didn't see nothing there. We got that stand put up. So we go put the stand up at Three Fields. We're walking through there. We get back to the third field. It's the very back one. And we get to the back of that field. We decide there's not a real good place to put a stand back there. And so we're walking out. And Richard and his son are in front of me. I hear something bust the brush over them. It'd be kind of like my northeast. And I look over there, and like I said, it wasn't very much of anything, but I can see something black just kind of like through the cracks of the trees there. And it was walking off. And he walked off very fluidly. I mean, it could have been something on four legs, but it looked black to me, and it walked off very fluidly. And I think that could have been a partial sighting. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I heard the brush break. I looked over there, and something was walking off. And I think, like I said, I'm always out there looking for that kind of stuff. So whatever did it wanted me to look over that direction, in my opinion, and I did. So
No, you hear about that stuff happening like that all the time, man. That's kind of your typical sighting, and I would say you probably did for sure had a partial sighting. And you talked about it kind of floating off. It reminds me of my encounter when I was a kid when I saw this thing, and after all the stuff happened, when it turned around, the only way I can describe it to you is it just kind of floated back into the tree line, right? Like there was no up and down gate. It was just kind of a float, and it was so weird. And I don't know what to do with that other than like it's just sometimes that's what they do. I don't know why or what the deal is behind that, but yeah, it's pretty wild, man. And you definitely have had seen a lot. I kind of think that once you see one or you've been around one of these things, they're more open to you seeing them, or the evidence of them, or who knows. But there's so much, like I said, that you walk away with way more questions than you do answers. But I really enjoyed that. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and sharing those experiences with me and my audience, man. And if you see something in the future, please let me know. I'd love to have you back on.
I'd definitely love to come back on, and thank you for having me, Josh. Thank you for giving people the platform to do this kind of thing. I want to get the word out, but I also like talking to people like you. I like being in the community. It's good to have the camaraderie.
There's a lot of good people in this community, and there's a lot of people that like to stir up trouble. But man, for the most part, it's a good community, and I've met some incredible people like you, and just that's what my favorite things about this is getting to meet people and talk to them about their encounters, and just kind of helps to get this stuff off your chest, and to know that you're not the only one out there seeing this stuff. And it just kind of helps you, at least be able to put it somewhere and say, hey, look, I'm not the only one that has seen this stuff. But, again, I appreciate you being brave enough to come forward. There's one thing I forgot to ask you about, circling back to, one of your earlier encounters when you heard that baby cry. I wanted to bring that up again before we jump off here. But when you heard that baby cry, and I know she said there were some other people in other areas close to there, but had you ever heard anything like that before, or was that the only time that something like that happened?
Well, that's the only time I've heard it. I've never heard of anything else happening around there like that, but that's the only time I've heard it. I mean, I don't go over there a whole lot, but I try to hunt over there a couple of times a year, and we were more mushroom hunting at that time. The only thing that had me kind of suspicious about it was because my wife and little girl were there that day. I watched so many videos and stuff that I had caught that they'll use the baby crying in the woods to lure women out. So.
I think you're spot on with that, man. I think your feelings with that are 100% accurate because they do that. I don't, it's one of those things. I talked to a gentleman. This has been probably 7-8 months ago, and he's a Native American. He's from Montana, and he said in their tribe, he said they would literally lure the women and children out, and they would just go missing. And they would do that by making crying sounds or calling out their name and different things like that. I talked to a guy that was out, and I can't even remember where it was at, but he was out in his cabin somewhere. I think it was Washington State, I want to say, but it's been so long ago, I can't remember. But basically he said that he heard his wife hollering for him in the woods, right? Like he heard his name, like it was frantic, like it, yeah, I know it gives you goosebumps, but but he said the strange things was his wife opened up the door, came out of the cabin, and was like, hey, what's that about? And she was inside the house, right? And so it sounded just like her, but they had gotten familiar with her voice. I catch flack sometimes, but I really do think that some of these missing 411 people, obviously not all of them, but a lot of them maybe even go missing because of Dogman or Bigfoot or things like that. But yeah, you're probably spot on with that, man. And I really do think, I know I said it earlier, but I think you're fortunate to be here to share these encounters. And, I mean, it's, you can tell that you stay prayed up about it and you're smart about it. You got your head on a swivel, but man, be careful in the future out there. That I don't got to tell you that, but again, thanks for coming forward and sharing those encounters with my audience.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did tonight. I love hanging out with people like Wyatt and giving people a safe platform to share these encounters. It's such a strange world. And I know there's a lot of people that are probably sitting on these encounters and they're just afraid to come forward to share that. But this platform is a very safe platform for you guys to do that. Would love to help you get your story out there. So if you've got an encounter you've been waiting to tell, or you just want to send me an email and tell me about it, please email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. This podcast would not be possible without you guys and people like Wyatt and just the community that we're building out. So I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. And I appreciate everybody out there, guys. I'm going to say it. Stay prayed up. It is so very important. We'll see you in the next episode.